Second time, yeah. Great presentation last year from Chris Taylor at ARUP. And, we heard a little bit about the perfect trains and the perfect planning and designing for trains. We've got that Texas High-Speed Rail program, the new Tex Rail project. So Chris is going to tell you a little bit about planning and designing the perfect transportation system and the stations that the trains will go to. And I imagine they'll have good working bathrooms and Wi-Fi and all that good stuff. So we'll hear from Chris. Please welcome Chris Taylor.
Okay, everyone. Thanks for sticking around for me late in the day here on Friday. I don't know about perfect, but I'm going to talk about high performance, and that's certainly kind of a hard thing to talk about because you could choose just about anything from infrastructure to systems to operations to staffing to train assists. So I had to pick something. I'm going to talk about a couple things. A little bit of background. I'm originally from New York, New Jersey, so I'm also a fast talker. I spent about 60% of my career doing conceptual engineering for major investment studies, 2nd Avenue Subway, Trans-Hudson Tunnel, Amtrak's 2050 high-speed rail vision. Moved to Texas partly because I was a lead engineer on the high-speed rail project, Texas Central. So starting at the beginning, what is high performance? Well, high, what we'd like to talk about today here, is great or greater than normal. And performance is the process of carrying out an action. So simply put, we're talking about high-performance rail system must move people better. And that generally means convenient, reliable, and frequent service. It means safe and efficient operations, and it means that stations are integrated into development. Now, this does require a focus on the customer and an application of what I would call corridor-appropriate technology and service offerings. And as Tony Robbins said, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always gotten. So there is time to do new things. I'll start out with a little tribute to Herb Kelleher, who recently passed away, who was the founder, I guess, of Southwest Airlines, before I tell you about whether the customer is always right. And the story goes that one woman who frequently flew Southwest was constantly disappointed with everything. She wrote them every week. And she didn't like the fact that they didn't assign seats, that there was an absence of a first-class section, that there was no meal. She didn't like their boarding procedure, and she didn't like the flight attendants' uniforms. So people at Southwest didn't know what to do with her, and they threw it up to Herb Kelleher and said, "You handle this one." He wrote back and said, "Dear Mrs. Crabapple, we will miss you." So here's to Herb. But, customer's not always right, and there are some bad customers, but you do have to pay attention to your customers. You have to understand what your customers want. You have to understand how they will interface with your system. And you have to understand that their expectations are going to constantly change, and the reliance on systems for information is always increasing. They have more and more information. And you need to understand that things will evolve and design must be flexible. Peter Drucker said, quality put in. It's what the customer gets out of it and is willing to pay for. Took a look at Houston Metro's recent public outreach efforts, and what they came up with for the theme, connections, more transit connections to more places, speed and reliability, expanded network with frequent transit connections and routes would generate high ridership. Customer experience must be safe, flexible, and be high quality. And they want innovation. They want to utilize advanced technologies to meet passenger needs. And these other things on the right mimic most of that except for two things, which I found interesting. They want longer distance trips as well, which supports Texas Central project, and accessibility, which is very important to me. My son's been in a wheelchair for the last 4 years, so I've learned a lot about this. Now, about customer expectations, trip planning tools is a new thing. It's actually not new. Travel agents have been using it since the 70s. People are familiar with, Google Maps, but it's basically a specialized search engine that finds the optimal means to travel from one place to the other. And with the growth of the internet and the proliferation of geospatial data, and new information technologies, this industry has really rapidly evolved into self-service browsers on your phone. It's not just Google Maps, there's all these vendors at the bottom that are being used today with special niches. And the customer is expecting that they have a mobility platform, an integrated mobility platform. And Gary Thomas talked about this morning, kind of stole a little bit of my thunder. And I think it's an interesting concept that the service is not really a train that takes you from one place to another. The service that we provide is mobility to our customers. And we're just a part of that. And there's a lot to it. There's these account-based smart cards, contactless systems, routing options, lots of open source solutions that are being shared, and smart cities, which is a new concept and is being adopted, links all that together for the transit and the route planning with the possibility of linked, customer profiles for tolling, smart parking, and electric vehicle charging. Now, the FTA is aware of this and has spent millions of dollars in the last couple of years on what they call mobility on demand. And that's really 5 programs that they set up to advance a vision of mobility on demand that is safe, carefree, and reliable for everyone. So Uber, we hear a lot about Uber and Lyft to help the transit. Is it a substitute or is it a complement? Well, we know that Uber has changed how people get around in cities, but it increases public transit use for the average transit agency, and it increases it more and more over time. The research that was done at the University of Toronto showed that 24 months after Uber enters into a market, transit use significantly up. Uber has I found this very interesting, a large complementary effect on rail ridership and a negative effect on bus ridership. And I think that's for 2 reasons. Bus riders are generally low income, not a slight there, but who's going to take an Uber to get to a bus? And buses generally go to more places than rail do. So solving the fixed route, fixed schedule problem, which is what transit suffers from and is really what Uber tries to solve. Now, NCTCOG and DART are way ahead on this again, and they secured, I think it's a grant from the FDA to do one of their sandbox programs to develop their GoPass app. And roughly 25% of their passengers are more than a quarter of a mile from a transit station, and that's generally in the business considered what people will be willing to walk to a transit station. So, if they could get that extra, last mile, they could pick up potentially 25% bigger market. And so they're using their GoPass ticketing app with the transportation network companies to improve service and connectivity, to have more efficient and more cost-effective operations. And they're partnering their app with smart app switching with GoTaxi, GoLink, GoPool, GoConnect, GoBike. Based on whatever Gary this morning, they'll have a Go Scooter pretty soon. So what's the combined effect? Well, ride-hailing services are intertwined now with mass transit. And it's very interesting to note that 95% of ride-sharing services are public transit users. And only about 9% have moved from transit to rideshare. So it's definitely complementary. And if you look at the CEOs of one of these app companies, he says that transit needs to learn from and operate in partnership with the options by implementing the convenience features that is in ride sharing. And that's really why people take Uber, because it's convenient. And integrating that convenience with multiple transit modes to deliver first and last mile mobility. And DART has actually seen this. There's a 13-fold increase in ridership on DART since they implemented the GoPass app. We'll get to the other side here that I talked about, which is corridor appropriate technology and services. Southwest. Last year I talked a little bit about what is the Southwest. There's a lot of good projects coming up in the Southwest, from DART's D2 project, which is light rail, subway elements, platform extensions, from CAP metros, station improvements, upper right-hand side there is Texas Central's outreach to the public about what the experience will be like. Lower right is the Texas-Oklahoma passenger rail study. Phoenix is doing lots of light rail extensions. Albuquerque, Rio Metro is changing up their fleet. So there's a lot going on. But if we focus on high-speed rail, which I've been focused on for probably about 10 years, we can look at two big places where high-speed rail has been working and see what kinds of lessons can be learned. So in China, 12,500 miles of high-speed rail, more than the rest of the world combined. Half of its passengers are generated traffic. And their key goals for setting up the systems were locate stations where you want development. Not sure we totally have that capability here in the States, but we can try to drive development, transit-oriented development to station locations. Try to cap size of cities so they are easier managed. Maybe what we could do is locate stations strategically to try to shift some development rather than to force development in one location. Connect mid-sized cities, allow mid-sized cities to grow, connect larger cities so that the economies can be linked together. China's also trying to expand its labor pool. So for the rural areas, you can have more affordable housing for people, for employees. And then spread technology, investment, knowledge, skills to outlying areas. If you look at Spain, which is Europe's most extensive high-speed rail network at 2,000 miles, what's most successful for them is connecting the big cities with large population centers and attractions. And what Spain found is it really helped boost its technological capacity and improve its manufacturing efficiency and export its expertise. When I was deputy director of high-speed rail for AECOM, AECOM acquired a company called Anaxa in Spain, and I was responsible to go over and integrate them into AECOM and deliver the 2050 high-speed rail vision for Amtrak from Washington to Boston in 12 weeks. And I was shocked at the capability that Spain had built in its engineering resources to design and deliver high-speed rail, and the way that they promulgated, pushed out standards and approaches and design practices and construction methods. So they've done a lot. But there's some negative things that have been learned. Spain has found that they do have a lot of high ticket prices to support their operations and some low ridership based on that, and that generally the revenue doesn't cover infrastructure costs. Now, part of that is because both Spain and China developed their high-speed rail for 350 kilometers per hour, 215 miles per hour, and found that they really want to run in the 186, 190 mile per hour range because it's significantly less in terms of operating costs, less issues with ballast flight, and the Office of Economic Cooperation and Development actually found that designing for that 215 miles per hour is about 90% more expensive than designing for something more reasonable. 90. I don't know if I believe 90%, but it's definitely more expensive. So what's my point? Well, I've been thinking about this for a long time. I wrote an article back in 2011 on this when the FRA was struggling with the issue of, is it high speed, is it higher speed, is it regional rail, what are the terms that we should use? And I promoted the use of a term called high performance rail, not high speed rail, because the public is generally unwilling to support a system that they perceive as fast trains for business people and tourists. We've certainly seen that in the Texas Central project with the comments that have come out of the communities. Not entirely justified. High-speed rail has a definite purpose. It frees up capacity on other parts of the network, serves a specific market. I think it's a great solution. I think Dallas to Houston, Texas Central is a great project with two large metropolitan areas and a good corridor. But we really need to be talking about efficient, reliable, and comfortable systems that get their passengers to their destinations. One well-integrated component of the overall journey. And choose the appropriate rail solution by corridor with thoughtful phasing so that you can deliver tangible early gains and long-term potential. I learned this lesson on the Amtrak 2050 plan, where we put out a bold vision for true high-speed rail in 17 major metro areas. And they were worried about the switch at mile marker 31. So I think we went a little too far and it had to step back and think about where can we get incremental improvements. But it was a successful project and it got Northwest Corridor recognized as speed rail corridor in the country. What we need to do is measure system performance across a broad range of characteristics. That's ride quality, capacity, frequency, reliability, safety, security, on-time performance, amenities, station environments, multimodal connectivity, and speed. Now, NCTCOG, again, is ahead of it on the Texas-Oklahoma passenger rail study. They just initiated on October 18. They issued an RFP to take that project a little bit further. And they prescribed that the team look at segment-specific technology solutions on the corridor, the need for multimodal transfers and staged implementation. So while there is this vision for Hyperloop out there, only one technology that they want to look at. I think that's the right approach. It's not one size fits all. North Texas is an excellent place for study of what I'm talking about. You have Houston to Dallas, Texas Central, true high-speed rail. You got the Topper study, Texas-Oklahoma passenger rail, looking at different corridor technologies. And you've got the Dallas-Fort Worth Core Express. So there, there's already a commuter rail extension. Is the right solution initially just to try to upgrade the TRE to better connect those two metro areas? Not sure. We should look. I could tell you in the plans that I developed for Texas Central, we did not preclude a future extension of high-speed rail directly from the Dallas terminal to Fort Worth. So we left that window open. So getting back to the customer, what's important? Well, at the University of California study, they found that 5 out of the 8 reasons that people leave transit happens at transfers or at stations. Long waits at the transfer, missed departures, unable to board. They ran to the train and it just pulled away. So I really think you need to focus on what you do at the stations and the whole journey, but stations are a key part of it. For HS2, which we're doing study of the future rail in extension, next project in England, they're looking at the whole customer experience. Starting with interactive journey planning and, your trip planning, comfort and service on the ride, connections for onward travel and incident management. I think that's very important for transit agencies. You need to look at it as a service from the day the customer starts thinking about it till after they get home after the journey. And your part may just be one piece of that. So let's talk a little bit about the experience at the stations, integrated transfers. There's a lot of interesting things being done. On the upper right there is the Taipei Metro. They do some interesting things where they have cross-platform interchanges. So in most systems, you'll see northbound on one side of an island platform and southbound on the other side of the island platform. Well, they're doing something where they would look at what people transfer, and they would put the highest transfer lines on opposite sides of a platform, which is really interesting and really good to eliminate the vertical circulation problem and increase the convenience and accessibility. But if you do that with crossings at grade, track crossings, you do have some issues there with capacity and safety. So you'd want to do that with flyovers. Very cool. Point being, think about it in advance. You may be able to do some smart planning on your projects. As far as multimodal interchanges, there's a picture there from Portland TriMet. They have the light rail, the bus, and the trolley side by side at their transfers, right? So that we need to be thinking about transfers, all modes to all modes. ARUP is doing something interesting in England where we're looking at actual flexible street pavements, using LEDs to alter the width and allocation of pavement space based on the demand usage. So one part of the pavement might actually be a transfer zone, which is made a special color, a different color at lunchtime, a pedestrian plaza, or a loading zone overnight. And there's a long-term possibility for dynamic assignment of curb space linked with intelligent infrastructure. So your Uber could be in one particular area and the pavement could be indicated for you. I think Mark was just telling me about It used to rent cars on Amtrak, and the car would be waiting for you when you got off of the train, something like that. Now, designed for access for all, getting back to disabilities, train travel can be a hassle for disabled passengers. Wheelchair users often rely on staff to assist, but there's new apps for this. There's a passenger assist app that's being developed by TransReport that allows disabled travelers to create user profiles that has their name, their photo, and their special requirements. And wheelchair users can request a ramp in advance. Hearing and visually impaired passengers can use the app to request help at the station for ticketing, and the app can track the staff that are helping the passenger and the passenger so the staff can find them. And it can identify the train that the passenger is traveling on and the car they're traveling in. Now, accessibility versus inclusivity. As I said, I'm more in tune to the disabled recently, and I really always thought about wheelchairs. But if you look at the percentage, wheelchairs are 10 to 15%, and you really got to think about ambulatory issues, hearing and vision impaired, cognitive disabilities, travelers with foreign languages, travelers with baggage, elderly, young, bariatric design. And in this country, in 2035, for the first time, those over 65 is going to be larger than those under 20. And if you look at what we're doing in London, 19% of the working population is disabled, 9% are caregivers, 40% of the population will be over retirement age by 2035, and 45% of those at retirement age are going to be disabled. Other apps, there's this TransReport app for system management to provide system information in real time that gives a voice to the customers. Issues and concerns can be raised immediately. It can help enhance security and safety and enable tracking of issues and feedback. Wayfinding. You know, interior spaces are complex and ever-changing. They're difficult to navigate. They're loud. Static signs and maps are inadequate. So there's new apps that have the ability for indoor navigation systems with GPS repeaters below grade for accurate real-time information and Bluetooth low-energy so that you can wear headphones, audio navigation, and plot your way through the station. They also have augmented reality where your phone could be showing the way as you hold it up in front of you, and interactive display boards and digital maps. We're working with the MTA on what's called the Enhanced Station Initiatives to improve finding with consistent and recognizable system identity, low maintenance design that's vandal and graffiti proof, and integrated system elements for each technology upgrade. And we've been rolling that out through the MTA system. And the new tools, new sciences is ethnography, where you observe behavior rather than doing questions, and futurology, what's coming next. So it's a new digital environment. The rail industry does face challenges. There's external factors like modal competition, government funding, customer expectations, climate change. Rail providers can't really control those things. And then there's internal rail industry factors. Complex infrastructure, capacity limitations, high costs, aversion to risk. Technology can help us launch new services, move people sustainably, anticipate change, convert data to improve performance and minimize risk, plan and implement strategies, and have productivity improvements. ARUP's been thinking about this for a while. We published a paper a few years ago, and Steve Clark presented 3 years ago about the future of rail in 2050. We call it the technology-oriented design, TOD. We've been talking a while about, you know, autonomous vehicles, drones for maintenance, and all these issues. If I still have time, I would like to quickly go through stations as a destination. Train stations are not just a starting point, they're a public place. If they integrate retail and multimodal transportation, then they can have passenger retention and attraction. Tourists and locals should go to mass transit stations to shop, to leisure, and stations should be designed not just for your customer, but for commuters and visitors and for the communities. At San Pancras Station, it's used by 40 million people a year, but only 25% of those people never board a train. This is something we did in Liverpool Street, England. You can see this is like an indoor mall. This attracts a ton of people and makes the system very successful and more transit users. For High Speed 2 at Euston Station, that's an open plaza integrated with development with a phased implementation plan directly next to Network Rail with Phase 1 and Phase 2 for high-speed rail. The station's integrated with the street grid, and there's changes to the street grid to support the future High Speed 2 project, and lots of plazas integrated into that. And it's integrated with public transit. One of the things that's interesting there is moving the taxi to a low-grade protected space with an open-air plaza above it, a park above it. If I can, I'll talk a little bit about Fulton Center in New York. This just won the Hay Award at ARIMA. This was a $1.4 billion project. What you're looking at is called the Oculus, which brings natural sunlight 2 levels below grade in Lower Manhattan. Quick history, this project came out of the Lower Manhattan Access Study where I was the lead engineer, and we were looking at how to bring commuter rail to Lower Manhattan, which is very hard. Lower Manhattan's less than a mile wide. High-speed rail station or commuter rail station could be a quarter of a mile long. So we said, what's the issue with improving the existing system? And we found that passenger distribution on the Lexington Avenue IRT and connections to the other lines was causing intense crowding on the north end of the station. And if we could just better distribute passengers along the Lexington Avenue IRT, we could improve the performance of the busiest subway line in Manhattan. And we got into the capital program for New York City Transit in August of 2001, 2 staircases at the south end of the station, and a PED connection to the World Trade Center. Then in September 2001, we know what happened. And so we got together and redesigned this and looked at the larger system. And in Lower Manhattan, 8 subway lines. And in every location, it was just what I'm talking about. It was missing connectivity, platform end crowding, difficult circulation, poor signage. It was all set up by 3 independent transit agencies that were competing with each other, so the connectivity between them was not there. So we took a total design approach to better distribute passengers for improved train and station operation, seamless connectivity of 8 subway lines and path, better surface distribution, expansive open paid and unpaid areas with lighting, retail, advertising. I think it was the first ever concessions brought into the New York MTA system for generating revenue. Adaptive reuse of historic structures and tied in to the building, and lots of resiliency features. And we made it inspiring. Stations should be inspiring. Stations should be inviting. This is the 2nd Avenue subway, inviting stations with integrated accessibility. You can see the entrance on the lower right there. The elevator is right behind it. Stations should be integrated. This is Gold Coast Light Rail in Queensland, Australia, where the light rail station is integrated into the urban plaza. They should be intuitive. This is King's Cross, London. People know where to go naturally when they're in that station. The resting areas are off out of the traffic area, the retail's on the other side, the gates are on the opposite side. They should be inclusive. This is the City Ring and Metro, some designs at the Copenhagen station. This is the MTA station work that we've been doing. I think it's 31 stations. So what are the takeaways? Changing demographics, development patterns, and technology will increase demand. Ever-increasing platforms, new technologies, and adoption of on-request transportation services will increase expectations amongst users and design requirements. And planning and design must focus on the customers, flexible system services and infrastructure, connectivity and inclusivity, all elements of the journey, stations as multiple purpose destinations, and digitally oriented design or technology oriented design. So that's it. Sorry I went long. Any questions? Regenerative braking is something that they're looking at for the Texas Central project. It's certainly something that we could look at. If you studied in detail the 2050 future of high-speed rail, ARUP is looking at all types of things to capture energy, including footfall of passengers, solar energy capture, rechargeable vehicles. Performance in rail, very broad topic. So my apologies for that.